On March 9th, 1918, in Bloomington, Illinois, two vaudeville performers, George Lovejoy Rockwell and Claire Antoinette Shade, gave birth to the oldest of three children and the future father of American National Socialism, George Lincoln Rockwell. The older Rockwell, known as Doc professionally, was a rising star in the entertainment scene. In typical highlight fashion, he divorced his wife when George was only 6 years old. Rockwell spent his teen years going back and forth between his father's home in Maine and his mother's in New Jersey. George attended Atlantic City High School, but never graduated due to a dispute with a teacher over his educational methods. He was then moved to Central High School in Providence, Rhode Island. George Rockwell enrolled in Brown University in 1938 as a philosophy student and worked on the campus magazine. He left the university in his sophomore year in favor of receiving a Navy commission. He attended flight schools and served in World War II in a supporting role. After the war, Rockwell briefly worked as a sign painter before he entered the commercial art program at Pratt Institute, where he won a $1,000 prize for an advertisement for the American Cancer Society. In 1950, Rockwell was recalled to serve in the Korean War. He was stationed in San Diego, California, where he trained Navy pilots. He had always been an active man, but it was around this time he began to get political. He supported the idea that General MacArthur should run for president, and was heavily influenced by Joseph McCarthy's anti-communist stances. In 1951, he purchased and read Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. A year later, he was transferred as a pilot to Iceland, where he soon met the niece of the Icelandic ambassador to the United States and married her. The couple spent their honeymoon in Berchtesgaden, Germany, around where Hitler once had his Berghof mountain retreat. He returned to the United States in 1954, where he worked several small jobs before launching the relatively successful magazine U.S. Lady, which was designed for the wives of American servicemen. The magazine had a large circulation, but was distributed for free, which caused Rockwell to sell it in 1956. In the following years, Rockwell openly professed his beliefs, and together with Harold Noel Arrowsmith, Jr., founded the National Committee to Free America from Jewish Domination. At the same time, he aided in the founding of the National States' Rights Party. Rockwell's political alignment became well known to the general public after being briefly linked to the Hebrew Benevolent Congregation Temple bombing. After learning of his associations, his wife's family took her and the children back to Iceland. They refused to return Rockwell's family to him, even after he sold all of his possessions to visit in Iceland. He never managed to see his wife or children again and entered a deep depression and became suicidal. He recovered from this and recommitted himself with renewed vigor to National Socialism. The same year that he lost his family, Rockwell formed the American Nazi Party and the International Political Alliance, the World Union of National Socialists. Following this, he was honorably discharged from the Navy as a result of his views. Despite no longer being employed by the Navy, he continued to go by the title of Commander until his death. In response to Rockwell's political activity, the American Jewish Committee enacted a policy of quarantine that sought to isolate Rockwell from the Jewish public, the American public, and the anti-Semitic public. This policy was ineffective and failed often. Not long after he began, Rockwell and his followers got into a brawl with a Jewish group, which resulted in George being charged for disorderly conduct. However, the judge ruled him mentally incompetent to stand trial and committed him to an insane asylum for 30 days. After leaving the asylum, Rockwell published a pamphlet titled How to Get Out or Stay Out of the Insane Asylum. In 1961, the ANP picketed the premiere of the movie Exodus in downtown Boston. The protest quickly turned into a riot, but was deemed a success by Rockwell nonetheless, due to the publicity it gave him. Rockwell obtained a Volkswagen van that he christened the Hate Bus and attempted to take it on tour, but was stopped by law enforcement and barred from demonstrating. He awarded party member Roy James with a medal in 1962 after James assaulted Martin Luther King Jr. at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The commander had hit the height of his popularity in 1965 and was contacted to provide a handful of interviews conducted by Alex Haley. A total of 5 interviews were conducted, and Rockwell and Haley continued to write to one another. While Rockwell claimed that the interviews had been altered once they were published, they still served to build both interest and his popularity as a speaker. He ran as an independent candidate in the 1965 Virginia gubernatorial election. After undergoing several internal political divisions, Rockwell renamed the ANP to the National Socialist White People's Party and officially adopted the use of the phrase "white power" as the party's official slogan. On August 25, 1967, George Lincoln Rockwell was shot and killed outside of a laundromat by John Patler, a member he had expelled from the party 5 months earlier. Patler was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder. He maintains that he is innocent and did not kill Rockwell. There was a brief disagreement between Rockwell's family and his second-in-command, Matt Curl, over burial arrangements, but Curl won out. The federal government approved a military burial for George Lincoln Rockwell on the condition that no Nazi imagery be worn by the mourners. However, they allowed Rockwell himself to be buried in a National Socialist uniform. Rockwell's supporters arrived in the form of a uniformed march, but were kept from entering the cemetery by law enforcement. The police demanded that they remove their swastikas, to which they refused. Both sides stood in a stalemate for hours, waiting for the other to back down. There was no proper funeral, and Curl had Rockwell's body secretly cremated the next day, due to fearing that hostile forces would attempt to confiscate it. George Lincoln Rockwell is largely considered to be the father of American National Socialism and an influential figure in far-right politics. Regardless of the many people he influenced, both in person and indirectly, Rockwell remains mostly forgotten by the American people and censored by historians.